I'm David Stiepleman, one of the co-founders of Sixth Street, and I'm really happy to be here with Rick Welts. Rick, whose bio is in your app, but I think that it doesn't even do it justice, has been called one of the most successful and lauded business executives in professional sports, and one of the most admired people in the country for his leadership in society broadly. It's pretty good. Incredible career as a sports executive, associated with 7 championship teams in the NBA, the WNBA, and the G League, including 3 titles at Golden State. In your 17-year career at the NBA league office, you did basically everything there. You ran, I think, practically every business at the NBA, becoming number 3 in the organization. You're the person who's invented All-Star Weekend, spearheaded the Dream Team. We'll talk about that, I hope. And help get the NBA going, the WNBA going. You were the president and COO of the Phoenix Suns. You were the president and COO of the Golden State Warriors, tip-off tonight against the Lakers at 7 Pacific. And in 2018, you were elected to the Naismith Memorial Hall of Fame, Basketball Hall of Fame, a rare distinction for a business side executive, which is incredible. Are you wearing the ring? You are. Excellent. And now, climbing even higher peaks, you're a senior advisor at Sixth Street, which we're very grateful for, and have just joined the board of our NWSL professional women's soccer team, which we're thrilled about. Thank you for being here. Welcome.
Thank you, David.
I'd like to start with a non-denominational benediction to luck. And so I'd love you to tell everybody who Earl Woodson is.
So I grew up in Seattle, Washington, before any of you were born. And my kind of currency of a relationship with my dad was going to games. We loved going to games together. That's where we talked. That's where we had our big conversations, and I loved it. And then in 1967, the NBA awarded an expansion franchise to the Seattle Supersonics, and we started going to Sonics games in Seattle. I fell in love with the sport right away, but there was something more going on there that became kind of my direction, I think, in my career. But I was going to Queen Anne High School. The coolest kid at Queen Anne High School was?
Earl Woodson. Why
was Earl the coolest kid at Queen Anne High School? Because he was a ball boy for the Seattle Supersonics. All right? So we'd sit in the back of English Lit class every day, and I'd get the gossip about my favorite players, my favorite teams. It was like awesome. So Earl comes in to class one day, very long look on his face. I'm like, dude, what's wrong? He goes, oh man, like my family's moving out of town. Trying to appear very upset. Earl, like, dude, you got to take me down and introduce me to whoever hires ball kids at the Sonics. And he did that. And so at 16, I had my dream job, and really the thing that changed my life more than anything else.
And you stuck around there for a while. You're working there through college. I didn't realize this, or I didn't put this together when I was reading up about you, that one of the most incredible people maybe ever in the world, Bill Russell, who became your friend, was the coach and general manager of the Supersonics sometime in the mid-'70s. How did that relationship form? And I'm thinking about all the young people in the room, or people who just started here. How did you get yourself noticed, or what did he see in you, do you think?
So we had a very small business office. There were more people at this front table than we had working for the Sonics at the time. But Bill Russell was a very early riser. And I was going to University of Washington and working part-time. I had to work, around my school schedule. So I would often be in really early in the morning, even on a weekend. And Bill, I'd hear these big footsteps coming up the stairs. At the other end of the hallway, I didn't have an office. I had a desk in the hallway. I'd see, Bill Russell going into his office, and I'm in awe. I would never speak to Bill Russell. 11 championships in 13 years with the Boston Celtics. And this would go on a lot. I'd be, at my desk at 7 in the morning, and he'd be, at the other end of the hall going in. One day he sticks his head out of the office and he goes, hey, white boy down the hall. And for whatever reason, I really can't tell you, that kind of started a friendship that lasted long, long time till his passing last August. I got to speak at his memorial service last August. But I think he saw something in me that I cherish forever. It's a friendship that I could never have imagined or never thought would have as a blessing in my life. But I don't know for sure. He never really told me. But I will say every time we spoke, till the day he died, he would answer the phone or address me as white boy down the hall. So quite an honor.
We were just talking outside. You told me a story about kind of getting yourself noticed and how you got into the marketing department. Can you tell people that story?
I loved your open video today. And the messages it sent to the young employees about how you get noticed at 6th Street. I'm doing a video speech tomorrow for young employees of the G League, and I'm going to use some of the material there because it's what I talk about all the time. It's like, doing your job great is like the given, right? It's how do you find that opportunity that sets yourself apart and adds value where no one else saw the value before. And so I'm a 17-year-old ball kid for the Sonics, and I'm looking at our bench one night, and we have these like kind of metal like containers for the water behind the bench, not very attractive. So I went in that weekend, I bought some spray paint at the hardware store. I spray painted them all green, like I stenciled the Sonic logo on the cans. And the next game, we go out there and we got like these really kick-ass water containers behind the bench. And the marketing guy, came up to me like, where did we buy those? Like, yeah, well, guys, I just kind of did it over the weekend. And a silly story, but I got offered a part-time job, when my ball boy career was over, got offered a part-time job in the marketing department. And part of it was just like they saw somebody who could look around the edges and maybe see something that wasn't being done.
I love that story. You went to the NBA in 1982. Not exactly what it's like now, like a global juggernaut. What was it like? Like, why did you do that? You had a great gig.
Because I was so naive. I thought I was in Seattle, Washington. We won a championship in 1979. The NBA was the biggest thing that ever happened, but I knew it wasn't a career. So I had left and joined a little sports marketing company in Seattle. None of you were old enough to remember before we had cell phones. You had one main office number. You come back from lunch and you'd see these little pink slips on your desk that said while you were out. I recognized the phone number, but I didn't recognize the name. I called back. It was an NBA number, and this guy on the other end of the phone said, "Hey, I'm just been put in charge of starting a business operation at the NBA, and I'd like to meet you. I heard about you." So flew back. I got to fly back to New York, stayed at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. Oh my gosh, it was so exciting. Walk over to my meeting in the Olympic Tower where the NBA still is, and my half-hour appointment with this guy went about 2 hours, and I ended up going to work at the NBA as the first person. This sounds crazy. 1982 as the first person ever to go out and try to talk to corporate partners about investing marketing dollars in the NBA. That function didn't exist. We scheduled games and assigned referees. Now, I thought this is going to be the best gig ever. I had the worst job in America. Okay. You have no idea what a damaged property the NBA was at that moment in time. First league with widespread accusations of drug use by its players. Talk about teams going out of business, not any talk about expanding the league. Sports Illustrated did a famous cover where they had a deflated NBA basketball on the cover with, the story inside offering the conventional wisdom that America would never embrace a sport where 3/4 of the athletes were black. Like, duh, So that was what we were up against. I couldn't get a meeting. I couldn't get anyone to talk to me about spending money on the NBA. The biggest part of luck for me on that was that guy that recruited me was a guy by the name of David Stern, and 2 years later, the owners would be smart enough to elect David Stern commissioner, which he served in that role for 30 years. But he had this band of crazy young warriors that were working for him that got to ride the train at that point, and ended up spending 17 years there in every job imaginable, seeing the world, and it was a great career. But the NBA was in a terrible situation and needed a total reboot to be successful.
What was your pitch, and how did it evolve? Like when you're trying to get corporate sponsors role.
Well, it was always the fourth in the category that would talk to me. The number 1, 2, and 3 would never even take a meeting for me. So I think my first deal was with Fujifilm, because I tried for, a year to get Kodak to talk to me. I couldn't. But here, I think it's another example of trying to just, find something new. Stern had been elected commissioner in '83. He was going to take office after the All-Star game in 1984. And he'd already set a couple of the themes that he wanted to get out there. We're getting in touch with our sport again. We had no connection to our history, our players, our coaches. We had no video record or photographic record of our history. That was our job. We were the caretakers of the league. And we were going to go to Denver for the All-Star weekend. Those of you who are sports fans know that Denver had a very rich ABA, American Basketball Association, history before they joined the NBA. And in 1976, one of the most famous events in the history of basketball, 1976 ABA Slam Dunk Contest, where this player named Julius Erving took off from the free throw line and dunked a basketball. No one had ever seen it before, and he won the ABA Slam Dunk Contest. So Carl Scheer was the president of the Denver Nuggets, came to New York like 3 months before the All-Star game to start to talk about planning it. Now it takes like 6 years to plan an All-Star weekend, but 3 months before he goes, hey, I think it'd be great if at halftime we did a slam dunk contest. We're an ABA city, it'd be great. I'm like, oh, Carl, sorry, CBS has got this red on round ball thing that they run at halftime. We don't have halftime. I went home that night, turned on the TV, and as luck would have it, there's a baseball old-timers game on TV. And I watched a 60-year-old guy get up and hit a home run over the Cracker Jack sign in right field. Like, okay, I think I got it. So went in the next morning into Stern's office, said, what if we do a second day of events? We've only ever just show up for a game and everybody goes home. So we could do a slam dunk contest that kind of honors the heritage in Denver, and we could do an old-timers game where you want to get back in touch with the history of the game and all these players. And he was like, I like it. So I'm going to go talk to the commissioner, who was Larry O'Brien at the time. Stern came back like, yeah, no, commissioner says last weekend in office, yeah, we're not going to try this. I don't know what happened. Came back a few days later. Okay, commissioner says you can do it. You have no budget. You got to figure out how to pay for it. And you can't embarrass him on his last week in office. So with that, it's like, here we go, right? So I actually had something to go out and talk to sponsors about. So there was this little beverage company in Indianapolis called Gatorade. So I got to make the league's first deal with Gatorade to sponsor the Slam Dunk Contest. It's actually the longest standing sponsorship the NBA has. Gatorade still a sponsor of the NBA. Gillette wouldn't talk to me, but I got Schick to sponsor the old-timers game. I got American Airlines to pay the airfare. And we showed up at the Brown Palace Hotel. This is another one that falls in the luck category. There's Jerry West. There's Oscar Robertson. There are these amazing players that all of a sudden feel like part of the family again. And the writers and reporters are running around. They've got these great stories to write about the All-Star weekend. So we get to McNichols Arena. We sell it out, $5 a ticket. And what happened was just a lot of luck that day. So I will tell you this, the introductions of the old timers, thrilling. Here are these guys that we've watched forever. The game, it's better to watch 60-year-old baseball players than 60-year-old basketball players, okay? Not so pretty, okay? We had to have a seamstress in the locker room to expand some of the waist sizes and some of the uniforms. But then Julius Erving, God bless him, agreed to come back at the very end of his career and do the slam dunk contest again. And the very last matchup was Larry Nance, who was a rookie, against Julius Erving. And last dunk, Julius picked up the ball and did exactly what he'd done in the ABA contest. He walked the full length of the floor, came running down, took off, probably at this stage of his career this far inside the the free throw line, but dunked the ball. It went nuts, but he didn't win, and it was a changing of the guard, both from a player perspective, and then that weekend, O'Brien turned the commissionership over to Stern. Sports Illustrated gave us like 6 pages. They'd never covered the All-Star game before. Stern was viewed as like this new marketing genius. He's going to change the NBA off like on a rocket ship start. But it was another example of finding something we'd never done. Now, if you watched it this year, you may not be especially happy that I invented that, but it's been something that every league has adopted.
Wait, why?
And great. Well, it was kind of unwatchable the All-Star game this year,
okay.
so
I see.
apologize for that.
No, that's not your fault. The moral of the story is watch baseball, I think.
Exactly. Or women's soccer.
Or women's soccer. We'll get there. We're going to talk about that. We talk a lot about culture here. Super important. I think it's axiomatic. Maybe talk a little bit about why you think that is. But also, I'm interested. Let's talk about the culture of the NBA. From obviously way outside in, my understanding of David Stern, it's kind of an interesting mentor for you. How did that work? And did it not work sometimes?
Yeah, I do say my greatest accomplishment was reporting to him for 17 years and living to tell about it. Because if you know his reputation, pretty volatile. Not sure his style would fly in 2023 on a few different levels, but a passionate leader and just a genius leader as far as I was concerned. At that point, he could know everybody in the company, right? We had 40 people, and I could have a bad day in his office in the afternoon where I left the building feeling like this is never going to work, and go home, and at 10 o'clock, my home phone, remember home telephones? My home phone would ring, and it was Uncle David, and we'd sit there and talk for half an hour, and by the time that conversation was over, I was ready to come in the next day and knock down walls for this guy and for this league. And he was a genius leader. That leadership had to evolve when you grow, right? I'm sure you guys knew every employee differently then than you do now, right? You had to grow. So, but he had the ability, the kind of Clinton-esque ability to have a completely unique relationship with everyone. And screaming at me wasn't particularly effective. It didn't really bother me that much. Like I kind of knew his act. But he knew how to poke me in ways that just would kill me, right? And know where my vulnerabilities were and get me to do a lot better. What was the other part of the question? Culture. Well, no, so here's a great advantage that we had, okay? In 1982, baseball's really successful. Football is obviously really successful. We're not even a competition. So, and we don't have any employees, so we start hiring at that point. And our employee base looked very different, still does, by the way, than baseball or football. So we had a lot more women in positions of responsibility. We had a lot more people of color in the organization. It much more kind of reflected our society at that time than it did this long-standing institution of traditional success. I think it was a huge advantage. And Stern brought a huge social conscience to our organization. The idea that we had this amazing platform, and shame on us if we don't use it to try to improve our society or the communities in which our teams operate. So those two things were really drivers for us. The value, we didn't know what DEI was, but the value of having a very diverse workforce making decisions about the future of our league, and doing it with a social conscience that we had that screen, that we had the opportunity to do something beyond our business that might make the world a little bit better.
I was going to ask this later, but I'll ask you now because you kind of brought it up. Social conscience, it's something that your public, less our public, but maybe our employees and certainly people who we deal with want us to comment on things. What's your framework for that? You were asked to come in and talk to the NBA owners about playing the All-Star game in Charlotte in 2019 or something like that. They had passed, in North Carolina, an anti-LGBTQ statute, and I thought you had a very interesting framework for how you advise the owners to think about that.
So you haven't told them I'm gay?
Well, you're gay. You didn't
Okay.
just come out
All
here.
right.
You came out in 2011.
Okay.
I want to talk about that too.
This just
we skipped to the end of my outline, so I didn't. We skipped over you're gay. but
Kind of
you're
as
gay.
part of the story.
Fair enough. That's why we're doing this together.
So we did have a situation, they called it the bathroom bill in North Carolina, where, in response to the city of Charlotte passing some very progressive LGBTQ legislation, the state of North Carolina took away the ability of cities to do that and actually imposed this bathroom bill where everyone was required to use the bathroom that was their assigned gender at birth. And it put us in a real spot because the team there, owned by Michael Jordan, had done everything right in the community. We were all rooting for a great all-star there, but did it mesh with our kind of beliefs? And so we were really torn. And we have a Board of Governors meeting, it was actually in Las Vegas, I remember, and Adam Silver, the commissioner, came over before the meeting and said, we're going to have this conversation, but I want you to have the last word in the conversation. Okay. So,
At this point, you're at the Warriors. You're
I'm at the Warriors at this time. So we're, people are talking about how important this would be to North Carolina, to our Charlotte franchise, torn by, what we stand for as a league. And then Adam called on me, and I could, what I could say to him is, in kind of this role that I have played since 2011, I'm in a position where people, will reach out to me who are struggling with being gay or whatever in their organizations and aren't ready to take that step or aren't confident enough that they can do it and still be successful in their jobs. Men's sports is kind of still way behind where our society is on that. So I could, just say to the owners very simply, when you make this vote, when you make this decision, I just want you to think of the people who work for you, because I'm in touch with a lot of people on a lot of teams who don't feel like in your organization they're in a position to come to work with their authentic self. And I just want you to think about them when you vote. And the owners voted not to play the game there. We ended up a couple years later going back when North Carolina rescinded that bill, and we actually made that All-Star Weekend kind of a celebration of diversity. It was really a really good outcome, but it's one of those things, positions I never thought I would be in.
I like I think you said it at the time, maybe someone said it about what you had said to the owners, was there's always this argument like, it's a slippery slope, are we going to take a position on everything? And what you said was, or again, somebody said, was, look, no, it's too hard to test everything that you do, everything you say against every standard that you possibly could have. But when you have your spots that you can pick, you should pick them.
I agree. I agree. And it's getting more complicated.
Yeah, it is getting more complicated.
Political atmosphere we have now.
So 2011, you came out as a gay man. It was on the front page.
This just in.
Sorry, I'm going back now. Spoiler alert. It was on the front page of the New York Times. Big news. I remember it. And you just used the phrase that I was going to ask you about, which is being your authentic self. You said in your Hall of Fame induction speech, most important thing you ever did was merging your public and your private lives. And you then went to the Warriors. You spent 10 years there. Pretty successful 10 years, 3 championships. You built the Chase Center. What was it like? I mean, you were already a pretty successful guy. Like, how did it feel? Like, how did it feel to be your authentic self in that job? Why does that make a difference?
Well, for me, I knew I was gay at a really young age. I knew I was different. Figured out that meant I was gay. But I could never reconcile it with my love for sports and my desire to be a part of that industry. I never saw anybody. There was nobody out there that I could say, wow, that worked out pretty well for them. And that was a real impediment to me. I wasn't any different at work than I was at home, but I put barriers around myself about what I talked about, and people kind of honored that by not asking me anything. Like, I was never asked my entire career if I was gay. Now, some people had to know I was. I mean, you got gaydar, you can tell sometimes, right? But I never got asked. So I had reached a point in my life. I had a very tough personal loss. I lost a 17-year partner to AIDS in New York City in 1994, and had to go through that completely privately, away from my work life, which I wouldn't wish on anyone. I had a 14-year relationship that was kind of on the rocks. I'm in Phoenix now because I can't bring the most important person in my life into my work environment. Think about that in your life. My dad had passed away. My mom had been diagnosed with lung cancer. And it was kind of for me like, okay, like, this is it. This is my time. Like, I didn't know what to do. Like, I didn't know if this was a big thing or a little thing. I sought out a really wonderful guy in the media business in New York City named Dan Cloris, had a huge PR firm there, and asked him to go to dinner with me. And the scene's gonna look great in a movie. Snowy night, Upper East Side, table in the window. He's like, Dan, like, here's my story. Like, I can just talk to the people I work with and it could be great. Or if there's something more that could be accomplished here, I just can't put it in perspective. And he looked across the table at me and goes, Ricky, he still calls me Ricky. He goes, if you want to do this, number one, I want to help. And number two, I think it's page A1 New York Times, which I describe as my oh shit moment. Like, this is not exactly what I thought I was signing up for. But he paired me up with a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter, still writes the New York Times, named Dan Barry. Dan flew out to Phoenix and, he was great. He's like, you've done a really good job, but nobody knows who you are. Like, but the people you've befriended over your career who know you, every sports fan knows them. And if they would tell your story, it'd be much more impactful. So I got an airplane and flew up to Mercer Island, flew up to Seattle, drove over to Mercer Island. You referenced Bill Russell, knocked on the door. Big door opens, this giant of a guy with a Celtics hat is standing there. My stomach's like in a knot, like, okay, hey. So we go sit in his study. Between us is a picture of the president with Barack Obama saying to Bill, my inspiration. Nothing intimidating about the setting whatsoever. It's like, Bill, like, here's my deal. I want to ask you to do the one thing you hate doing more than anything else in the world, which is talking to a reporter. And he was like, 30 seconds of, yeah, of course, and then 2 hours of like just laughing and talking about old times, and repeated that with our two-time MVP at Phoenix, Steve Nash, David Stern, Val Ackerman, others. And, I was blessed in May of 2011 with what turned out to be a front page story in the New York Times, beautifully written, and changed everything. I didn't know how. I was prepared, I think, for 80% really positive, 10% really negative, some in between. I still keep on my shelf binders, people who took the time to find me, thousands of emails, and I keep them, and once in a while I'll open them up and read them. It sounds like I'm making this up. I swear to God, I'm not. Out of all the people who found a way to get in touch with me, I did not receive one negative response, which to me kind of blew my mind. So, but it was different. I'd done kind of everything I could do at the Suns at that point, and got introduced to these new owners of the Warriors. And I remember going to the interview in Atherton to talk to Joe Lacob and Peter Guber. I remember sitting there, or on the way in the car there, going like, this will be the first time in my life that I've ever gone through a job interview where everybody knows my story. Like, I don't know how that's going to be. And we sat down in Joe's living room, and we're talking for probably 30 minutes before one of them said, oh, yeah, like that New York Times story, how'd that work out for you? So I said, okay, I could work for these guys, all right? That was, and the fact that they would hire, an openly gay president for their prized franchise said a lot about the culture there. And I got to tell you, from the players to the coaching staff, my husband was as much a part of our owner's room as anybody else. Our players, high five Todd on the way out to the court. Like, it's been an amazing, amazing experience.
Thanks for that. When you got to the Warriors, well, something that I don't know, I think I sort of think it's really hard to change culture. Really hard. Like, once a culture is kind of in a place, like it's very, very difficult to root it out if it's not good. When you went to the Warriors, you said, we're going to rejoin the NBA. What did you mean, and what did you do?
So anybody who had been involved in the NBA had looked at the Warriors franchise for 20 years and said, oh my God, like, if you could ever get this in the right ownership, management hands, this should stand toe-to-toe with any franchise in any sport, right? The market that we live in, the crazy fan support for a team that hasn't made the playoffs in 16 out of 17 years in a league where half the teams make the playoffs every year. That's impossible to design that plan and execute it. And the corporate support, the companies that are in our area, like, are charting the future of the world, including the one who's here today. If you're a 20-something interested in the world around you and a great basketball player, who wouldn't want to be in that environment? So I'll never forget my first day at work. I brought all the staff into a conference room and said, like, here's the deal. Here's what this can be. And, it was like an invitation for everybody to jump on board. You can be on this train. Some of you have been here a long time. Maybe don't believe we can really do it. Probably time for us to talk about a graceful exit. And that first year, we probably turned over a third of the staff. And I was able, but a couple things, we had some real gems that hadn't been in a position of responsibility there. And I was able to elevate them, who were very well liked by their peers, to areas of much more responsibility, which was great. Fill in the gaps. I had a great recruiting story with the expertise we didn't have. And at the same time this was going on, we had Mark Jackson as our coach, who changed. We had a culture of losing. In the business office, you just expected to lose. Pretty good gig. Your year's over April 15th every year. You get a long summer vacation, you get a raise, you come back, you do it all over again. Players basically had the same attitude, took the court every night expecting to lose. That's what the Warriors did. And Mark Jackson came in and really changed the mindset of the players. At the same time, I was trying to change the mindset of the team. And we started having some success. We started having some business success, and we started winning some games. And we ended up going to the playoffs. And that success just started to feed, off itself. And you really could just feel this momentum growing. And we made some hard decisions. We fired Mark Jackson after he got us to the playoffs, something that the Warriors weren't very accustomed to. And we replaced him with Steve Kerr. Now, let me give you that setup. So let's see. Mark Jackson was a player who became a broadcaster who never coached a game before. Now you're firing him. You're going to hire Steve Kerr, who is a player and now a broadcaster who's never coached a game before, and expect a different outcome. But Steve was our general manager in Phoenix, and I knew what we were getting as a human being. And, his first year, he went to Andre Iguodala, perpetual all-star, started every game he ever played, and said, I think the best role for you to help the team would be to come off the bench. And then he held his breath. And Andre said, okay. And that, in the locker room, changed everything. If Andre Iguodala was willing to make that sacrifice for the good of the team, who am I to not do whatever it is that adds to the value I give to our team? And, Andre Iguodala ended up being the MVP of the NBA Finals that year when the Warriors won the championship in 2015. What came out of the locker room, which became the mantra for our whole organization, and it wasn't a marketing slogan.
Strength in numbers.
Strength in numbers. And what that meant was that everybody knew their role, and everybody knew that collectively the belief was, unless you did your job well, we weren't going to get to the ultimate place we wanted to get. Everybody had to accept their role, understand how it fit in, and be great with it, all right? And that's what we tried to cultivate in the business organization culturally, and that's why the Warriors teams have been so successful.
And you preach no silos on the business side. I think you're also telling us a story about how the success on the sports and the business side radiate back and forth to each other. People take pride in the organization. It's an unbelievable decade. Not surprising that the Warriors were named franchise of the decade in all sports. I mean, it's unbelievable. I don't want to lose sight of the future. So we heard our colleague Lauren Wheatman gave a talk this morning on Taylor Swift and the economics of Taylor Swift. I have a feeling it rhymes with how you see the future of sports over the next 10, 15 years. And maybe talk about that, talk about the NWSL team, how you see that fitting in, why you decided you could do a lot of things. You're talking with us, which is amazing. You're also spending a lot of your time on this soccer team of ours, which is an unbelievable boon for us and the team in the region. Why that?
Well, I don't think I knew who 6th Street was 6 months ago. And then I got this cold call from this guy, Alan Wexman. Have you heard of him? started describing, quite enthusiastically, I might say, this opportunity.
Alan, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And we did a Zoom. We got together in person and clicked on a lot of different levels. And what it gives me, and I'm so excited for you guys. You're going to have an amazing team to root for. It's a perfect intersection of, I was there when we launched the WNBA. I know why women's sports is so important. WNBA Day is the longest standing professional women's sports league anywhere. And what's happening in women's sports right now, we're at a completely unique place we have never seen before, okay? Where, the women's Final Four in basketball is the highest rated Final Four ever, the men's Final Four, the lowest rated Final Four ever, right? The trajectory is amazing. And so this combines my love and belief that women's sports is really important with building great team organizations and hopefully at some level even helping the league be successful. So it's a perfect intersection. And I got to tell you, everybody I've met from 6th Street, like this morning session, to see your culture, to see the process that you go through, it's incredibly impressive to somebody from the outside looking in. And I'm kind of excited to be on the inside looking out a little bit.
We are too.
Yeah.
If you think about and away from the soccer team necessarily, but sort of like where you see sports going, whether it's, like where should we be thinking about allocating dollars, our investors' dollars?
Yeah, wow. So, live game distribution is going to be the biggest question mark out there. We're about to see a huge shift in how people are consuming live sports. The great thing about it when you're on the content side is a lot of companies are going to live and die and be successful and fail by how they figure out how to get content. We have the content everybody wants. Live sports, nothing drives viewership in numbers the way live sports drives viewership in numbers. Yep. We got that going for us. But how we figure that out, how we figure out the old model of regional sports networks and network television is dying, okay? The new model of direct-to-consumer is emerging, but we haven't figured out how to monetize it in a way that's comparable to our old system yet. So a lot of disruption, a lot of opportunity, and a lot of opportunity to know our customers much better, right? The beautiful thing about not giving your product away to a third-party distributor is you have potentially a direct connection with your customer, and you can know everything about your customer, and you can know everything they're interested in. You can satisfy needs that you can't possibly satisfy right now in our current system. I think that's the biggest question mark here. The future is amazing. There's nothing about, I read that 6th Street might have paid $53 million for this franchise. I don't know if that's true, but
can't believe everything you read in the press, but we'll confirm.
I think Alan could have bought the entire league for that about 5 years ago. But what's happening, show me an example where sports franchise valuations have gone the other way. They don't. They go up. And the question is, can we build, a 2024 organization that has, an approach to everything that's focused on the future as opposed to we're not burdened by any of the historical past with our franchise. So I think that's going to be important. There's a lot of challenges. Social media, our players now are their own brands. They can go direct to our fans without needing the team to be the intermediary to tell their stories. That presents opportunities and challenges. But I've never been more optimistic. If you're going to invest, I'd invest in soccer and basketball. Those are the two sports worldwide that are over the next 20 years going to own the world. It's not going to be baseball. It's not going to be American football. You can't retrofit that to the rest of the world. America is discovering soccer in a way they've never discovered it before. The Women's World Cup is going to be awesome for us. So I've never been more excited or optimistic, and we're going to build something great in the Bay Area around women's soccer.
We agree. We definitely agree. What are you reading? What are your reading habits? How do you How do you stay smart? What do you like to do?
I am a voracious news reader more than anything else. I can't start my day without New York Times, Wall Street Journal, still reading the San Francisco Chronicle, Sports Business Journal, Sportico, and then I can have my second cup of coffee. Seriously, that's how I spend my first 90 minutes of the day. I want to know. I'm sending you or Alan a story I just saw about, by the way, did you see where what's today, Tuesday? Yesterday, Arsenal had 60,000 fans in attendance for their women's soccer game. I can't remember what sport we are. Their women's soccer team, 60,000 people at the Emirates yesterday for Arsenal. And I had to send that to you yesterday morning because it's the most exciting thing that I saw.
That's great.
So I love reading business books. I'm a business book geek. I just read Bob Iger's book again, and so I love reading business books. But I'm really like more a news junkie than anything else.
This is delightful. I have a million more questions and things to talk about, but luckily you're here, so people should spend time with you. I'm going to just read something you said in your Hall of Fame speech about the unique power of sports to bring people together, to be a source of pride, inspiration, and connection in communities everywhere. Not a bad thing to spend your career on, and we thank you for it, and we're so happy that you're spending time with us, and thanks for this.
Thanks, David.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
The views expressed in this podcast are not necessarily those of 6th Street, and 6th Street is not providing any investing, financial, economic, legal, accounting, or tax advice or recommendations in this podcast. Please see additional disclosures on our website for more details.